Well, hello everyone. It's about that time. This is your amazing new host, Dr. Mischele Watson, and I personally want to welcome you to my new podcast, Let's Just Talk About It, the premier place to keep up to date on some amazing topics and discussions that will encourage you to consider the phenomenal power of change. I hope you enjoy the show, so let's get straight into it. Well, hey y'all. Good, great evening. Welcome to this episode of Let's Just Talk About It. I'm your host, Dr. Mischele Watson. I'm so excited to have you with me today because this episode today will not disappoint. But first, I would be remiss if I did not thank some amazing people helping to make this podcast possible. Thank you to our production team and producer, Kratos Media, and our intro-outro music producer, Dr. Ronnie Song of August Child Media. I want to welcome you today because I am so pumped. And tonight, as I already do, we're going to just talk about it. And we will make sure that we set the stage for what's to come. Y'all ready? Good, because I am. This podcast is designed to drive an enlightened conversation, to address our own roadblocks, right? And understand and account for the barriers that keep us bound with an all or nothing mentality. And so many of my guests will provide insights on how to actually learn to see through a different lens and focus on the change that would help make a difference for a lifetime. There is something to love when we think of being changed beyond the challenge. So make sure you stay to the end, and this is where we will hear from our audience, where you're going to send us a topic you feel you just want to talk about, and we'll possibly use it for one of our upcoming episodes. Yes, and we will give you all the credit, okay? So send me an email to Dr. K. Mischele, Mischele, at gmail.com. And we really want to hear from you. First, there are so many great things that we have an opportunity to do in this podcast, and that remains relevant today. And, we were having such great conversations in many of our other episodes. We wanted to ensure that we continue moving along in this very process. One thing I want to talk quickly about is three projects that God gave me. One was thinking out loud about change. The second is when change becomes your only option, then of course, my thinking out loud about change journal that we hope that would give you an opportunity to learn how to allow change to become a big part of your life. And so the power of change is always about realizing that it begins with you first. And the more we talk about change, the more we hope this will give you an opportunity to change within your own self. All right, so make sure you stay with us throughout this entire episode because our conversation today is going to be all that, as they would say, and a bag of chips. Okay, it's going to be great. So I am very, very excited today to have an amazing person joining as our guest on Let's Just Talk About It. This episode is all about how to be a man that is strong in his relationships, as a father, as a husband, as a man of God. So joining me today is Stefan Hernandez. He's joining from Ithaca, New York, all the way from Ithaca, New York. And let me just tell you a little bit about Stefan. He is a multi-gifted, talented, and called individual. He believes his calling is to ultimately inspire, to empower, and to enrich all those who have come in contact with his gifts. Stefan is a proud son of Trinidad and Tobago and is known for his rich, colorful tenor voice. You're going to hear that in a minute. That has been filled many recitals and concert halls. He is a gifted storyteller and performer. He is also a graduate of the prestigious Eastman School of Music under the renowned American tenor Anthony Dean Griffey. He has performed in over 20 fully staged productions and over 100 recitals and concerts. Stefan is truly a man of faith who answered the call of God at the very young age of 14 years. He's a licensed pastor since 2017, and in 2020, he was ordained and commissioned to service others and devote his life to the things of God. He is also a graduate student of the Northeastern Seminary, where he is pursuing a Master of Divinity. Would you help me welcome Stefan to our episode today?
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so honored to have you with me. Thank you for making the trip all the way from Ithaca, New York. He did this and came all the way to the Maryland area to be in our studios today to talk about this phenomenal topic that we have. And so I'm going to jump right in. You know, often, Stefan, I hear women say that they are not drawn to men that are soft or sensitive, and often they feel, you know, they need a hardcore man. They need somebody that's going to go in. They need somebody that's, you know, going to lead from the front. You know, all of these all of these things in which we describe a man, right? And so I wanted to have this conversation with you because we have had opportunities to talk. We've had opportunities to for me to conversate on some things that you've posted on Facebook. And I said, I need to have Stefan Hernandez in our studios to talk a little bit more about being a father, a husband, a man of God. And so we're going to start right there. So when, let me just throw it right on out there. Let's put it out there on the table. So when women said that men shouldn't be soft and sensitive, what would you say to that?
I would first want to know, well, firstly, thank you for having me again.
Yes.
It's exciting to be here in Maryland. I would first want to know, well, what exactly do you mean by soft and sensitive?
Mm-hmm.
I think that those words have a lot of power.
Mm-hmm.
But I have learned in life that words don't mean the same thing to everyone else.
Yes.
So what do you mean by being soft and sensitive? My definition of being soft and sensitive might be very different from someone else's.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that women are talking about, I would not think that they're speaking about men being emotionally intelligent or men being connected to their experience. Because oftentimes, as a husband myself, that is oftentimes something that my wife and I will have a conversation about, of me being connected to her experience.
Yes.
And so there's a certain level of sensitivity that is required of an individual to be connected to another person's experience.
Yes.
When I think about someone being sensitive, it means that they are responsive. It means that they are receptive.
Yes.
And so I think that I don't know where exactly that word came from or what is meant by that. But I think that in any relationship, you need someone to be sensitive. You need someone to be receptive to you. You need someone to be able to receive all of who you are and be able to appropriately respond to that. And oftentimes I think that the troubles that arise in relationships of any type is when there is a callousness that's present, because
Mm-hmm.
for me the opposite of sensitivity is to be callous, to be cold,
Yes.
to be hard.
Right.
And when there's a callous that is present, it creates a disconnect in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I would say is that let's break down what sensitive actually means, because I don't know I'm not sure if that's what the women that we're speaking about, if that's what they actually mean. Because every woman I know wants their man, wants the men in their life to be connected to their experience. Every woman that I know from my mother to even the women that I pastor.
Mhm.
They want men to be sensitive. They want their sons to be sensitive to their experience. They want them to be connected. And
Mhm.
you can't feel connected to someone if they're not sensitive, or sensitized
Mhm.
to you.
Absolutely. When I think in the context of what I've heard, some women kind of share around men being not wanting men that are soft and sensitive. It makes me question the fact of if they don't want a man to have empathy to understanding their needs as a woman. And we often hear men are from Mars and women are from Venus, right? And we understand that there are great stark differences between a man and a woman. But personally, even for me, I want to ensure that the person that I'm in a relationship with, a marriage, a partnership with, understands the sensitive side of me and will be willing to walk in the fullness of that, especially if you are a man that has children. Because often we find that fathers have struggled, some fathers, not all, some fathers have struggled in telling their sons, I love you,
Mhm.
or telling their daughters, I love you. I held my dad to a very high standard when I became, when I got married, and um, he told me he loved me all the time.
Mhm.
So my expectations were that, a man would demonstrate and be able to verbally say how much he loves someone. And that's the soft and sensitive side of that. But as a man with a daughter, and being soft, how would you characterize that? What do you think she needs in order for you to be able to demonstrate that soft side as a father, but yet still be the head of your home?
When I was looking at your topic, I said to myself that Dr. Kim is trying to get me in trouble, because I'm going to say some things that are probably going to be controversial, but they are,
The truth.
my opinion of
Mhm,
thought.
mhm,
And so I'm a black man, and so
mhm.
I can speak from a black man's perspective.
Yes.
Um, the first thing would say to your question is that we have to begin to dismantle gender roles.
Yes.
Because the truth of it is that what we expect people to be and how we expect people to show up in our lives
Mhm,
is oftentimes based on the influences that we have received from since infancy.
mhm.
A deficit of a strong male figure in a young girl's life
Mhm.
oftentimes means that in the formative years of her life, in her infancy, into her toddlerhood, into her adolescence, and so on, in the developmental stages of the human being and the human mind, um, an absence of a strong male figure oftentimes means that she will grow up to be a woman that is craving what was not given in infancy. And
Mm.
so we have to talk about the influences that arise out of our infant years and how they impact and how our history impacts how we show up in spaces. So for my daughter, for me, I am her first introduction to a black man. I am her first introduction to the love of a black man. And
Mm.
I'm the first introduction that she will have in an intimate setting to what she should expect from a black man.
Mm.
But the truth about it is that the black man is under attack.
Mhm.
And the black man has been under attack since slavery. And so what we have seen is the erosion of the character of the black man, and we've seen the erosion of what it means for the black man to be present in the household.
Yes.
And so my daughter has a certain level of privilege that a lot of her counterparts of her same age, of her same ethnic background will not have. And that is a black father in the household.
Mhm.
And so I think that that's the first thing I think about when with my child, with my daughter. It is a very fine balance because for me, I am one of my influences, right? So I did not have a very good relationship with my father,
Mhm.
and my father was not a man that said, "I love you," and would hug you and stuff of that. He would give you money and he would, whatever else, but he would show up to, my rugby games, my swimming games or whatever. He was very much into my athleticism. But he was not a touchy-feely person. But that was very oftentimes the men of his generation.
Yes.
So again, that points to, and it begins to help us understand gender roles.
Yes.
That the role of a man in society is oftentimes, particularly in the Black community, is oftentimes he has to be seen as a provider. Men are seen as doers, and if they are unable to do, then they are not men. And so that's the box that we're in. And so when a man is not able to do because he does not have a job or he does not have money or he is not able to do the things that he is, that society has ordained him to do, then he feels less than a man. He is emasculated, and he is undesirable. He's undesirable by his community, and he's undesirable by any man or woman that he would want to be with.
Wow. You said something that really resonated with me with regard to how this all began, right? And that goes all the way back to slavery. And the conflict that the man experienced even during slavery when white men put them on, for sale, or that white men tore them away from their wives, their children, and they felt that they didn't have any capacity to stand against it, right? And so now, fast forward into our generation today, we still find a lot of that present in the lives of men. I'm myself very privileged. My dad was a part of my entire life. My parents were married for 63 years. He was probably the only person that told me I didn't talk too much, which would later become my career, right? He was the only man, the only person in my life that never said that to me. Everybody else had to say that, but my dad did not, and he was very mindful of his relationship with my sister and my brother and I, just three of us. But when we talk about the history of the Black man, which is very intriguing, what would you say today as we move us forward, right? To how we can help Black men to understand the various levels of their experience, their lived experience, right? And in connection to a woman's lived experience, and in the connection with the children's lived experience. How can we better define that to make it more of an opportunity where there's growth and there's love and there's compassion and there's empathy in these relationships? I know that's a lot to unpack, but just kind of circle around what you think might be a great way to add value to this particular relationship from the perspective of a Black man.
Let's talk about it.
Let's just talk about it, right?
I think that firstly, what does the Black man need? The Black man needs to feel seen. The Black man needs to feel heard. That's the first part of it. Many Black men are growing up in households where they are being conditioned, and this is going to be a controversial statement, but please hear my heart. They're being conditioned by their Black mothers to be everything that their fathers could not be.
Wow.
So that is the first step, right? And so what does that mean? That from my adolescence and from my childhood, I am being shaped and influenced by the trauma of my Black mother. I am not being seen. I am not being heard. And so my experience is being erased. I want you to be a provider. I want you to be strong because your father was not strong. I want you to be the man of the house, but you're 10 years old. I want you to support me in the way that a grown man should, but you haven't even experienced the full development of your brain stem as yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there is an invisibility that Black men are shrouded under. And I think that, one of the most interesting pieces of research I've ever read was by Dr. Joy DeGruy, and it is called the post-traumatic slave syndrome. And when we talk about the influences that are experiencing, that the Black man is experiencing and Black communities are experiencing, we have to talk about how our history is impacting our present.
Mm-hmm.
Our history is impacting our present, and it is robbing us of our future.
Wow.
The reason why it is robbing us of our future is because when we are failing to address the things that we're carrying around in our backpack, the pain that many Black men are experiencing, many Black fathers are experiencing. From a young age, we're told as Black boys, don't cry,
Mm-hmm.
be a man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what does that do? That erases my experience.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me invisible. It makes my pain invisible.
Right.
It makes my happiness or whatever I'm experiencing in the moment invisible. And so what does that do to a young boy that from a young age is told to what you're doing does not fit the mold that I have for you?
Mm-hmm.
It causes an identity crisis.
Yes.
And when these men now grow up and they traumatize our daughters,
Mm-hmm.
and they are not positive contributing members to society, we ask ourselves, well, how did this happen? Where did this go wrong? Well, the truth is, as a Black community, we first have to take ownership that we have, in many ways, because of the post-traumatic slave syndrome, perpetuated
Yes.
The traumas that was experienced on the slave plantation.
Right.
You have to understand that during slavery, the Black man's identity was erased.
Right.
He wasn't a man, he was an animal.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why he was an animal is because the slave owner had to make him an animal because he couldn't be equal to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see a man that was erased of his manhood, of